They talked of their struggle to get past these feelings. One mother, Victoria, offered this: "I didn't know that I was capable of such anger, and I knew that it would do me in if I didn't do something about it." Welcome to Living Life in Color Again, the podcast for anyone who has lost a loved one to homicide. I'm your host, Kimberly Christopher. May is considered Mother's Month, and for good reason. In many countries, including the US, Canada, Australia, India, China, and much of Europe, the second Sunday of the month is Mother's Day. While its origins lie in a movement started by Anna Jarvis in 1908, Mother's Day did not become an official U.S. holiday until 1914. Canada followed suit, officially recognizing Mother's Day in 1914 as well. And in Mexico, Mother's Day is celebrated on May 10th. While the origin stories and dates of this holiday may differ by country, people love to celebrate moms, grandmoms, mother figures, mothers-in-law, and stepmoms in similar ways. Mother's Day is considered a very busy day for restaurants worldwide, especially those cultures where families celebrate special occasions with special meals. Mother's Day is the highest grossing Sunday of the year for restaurants, even surpassing NFL Sundays. 45% of transactions on Mother's Day occur during brunch hours, which are 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. 84% of U.S. adults are expecting to celebrate the holiday this year, 2025. And altogether are expected to spend $33.5 billion in gifts, flowers, cards, and meals, according to the National Retail Federation. Many moms also received the gift of conversation. In 2024, Verizon reported that their consumers used their phone networks 5% more on Mother's Day than they did on Father's Day. Callers not only called more, but chatted longer. Consumers spent approximately 2.3 million more hours on the phone on Mother's Day compared to Father's Day. Against this backdrop of advertisements for brunch, deals on flowers, seeing family pictures on social media, and hearing coworkers talk about their plans with their kids, the month of May is also a difficult time for women who have lost a child or children under any circumstance. Carly Mae Dudley, an Australian woman, knows that firsthand. In 2010, she started International Bereaved Mother's Day to honor mothers who have lost a child and those who struggle with infertility as a way to honor her stillborn son. Observed on the first Sunday in May, International Bereaved Mother's Day is a time for remembrance, support, and acknowledgement of the profound grief experienced by these mothers. The question that I'd like to address on this episode is, what happens to a mother after her child dies by homicide? My grief as a sister is so different than the grief that my mom felt. So I want to move through this topic by sharing articles and studies that provide us with language and perspective. We know that homicide is a loss by traumatic means, resulting in complicated grief and post-traumatic stress disorder. So it should not be a surprise that bereaved parents feel the effects most intensely. In an article written in 1987, Eileen Renier noted that the homicide of one's child creates a particularly difficult form of bereavement and one that involves multiple losses of both an actual and symbolic nature. In the days, months, and in some cases years following the murder of their son or daughter, surviving parents have shown several themes of traumatic consequence, such as intense fear, helplessness, anxiety, rage at the source of the trauma, sadness over loss, marked loss of interest in significant activities, psychic numbness, intrusive thoughts, discomfort over aggressive impulses like fighting or destroying property, hypervigilance, disintegration of beliefs, loss of meaning, disruption of personal relationships, feelings of isolation, guilt over presumed responsibility, and psychosomatic disturbances, which are conditions that affect things like heart rate, blood pressure, respiration, and digestion. In a holistic nursing practice journal published in the fall of 1999, two professors of nursing who also lost children to homicide stated that the grief of parents who have lost children to murder is extreme, prolonged, and unique. Those two authors, Maisie Schmidt-Kashka and Margaret T. Beard, continued to say that homicide survivors feel stigmatized and isolated from others in their social network. Losing a child has profound and lasting effects on a mother, impacting her mental and physical health, relationships, and sense of self. Mothers experience intense grief, which can manifest as depression, anxiety, and prolonged grief disorder. The loss can also lead to changes in identity, strained relationships, and difficulty reconstructing life. Symptoms of prolonged grief disorder include identity disruption, such as feeling as though part of oneself has died, a sense of disbelief about the death, avoidance of reminders that the person is dead, intense emotional pain, such as anger, bitterness, and sorrow. Is there hope that bereaved mothers can shift out of sadness? Yes, there is. I found an article that summarizes the results of a study meant to assess whether bereaved parents of murdered children were able to experience a positive outcome. Thriving After Trauma, the experience of parents of murdered children, was published in the December 2002 Journal of Humanistic Psychology. The authors include Jose Parapoli, Robert Rosenbaum, Leland Van Dale, and Esther Nzeli. The transformation that these parents experienced happened through cognitive emotional processes. What does that mean? It refers to the interconnectedness and influence between mental processes and emotional responses. Simply stated, it's the interplay between our thoughts and our feelings. Every participant engaged in some form of cognitive emotional processing to cope with and transform his or her trauma. The study concluded that 4 processes and 6 resources helped the parents reach positive outcomes. It helped me to move through this data by using a what and how lens. The 4 processes answered the question, what did the bereaved parents do to thrive? The 6 resources answer the question, how did the parents do it? Let's talk about each of the 4 processes. The first what is acceptance. This was the starting point of healing and transformation. Survivors accepted that their son or daughter was really murdered and that no matter what they felt or thought or did, it was a reality that they could not undo. Murder was an event of the past over which they had no control. Acceptance was not easy and took time and effort. One mom in the study says this about her acceptance. Acceptance does not mean dwelling on what might have been or what could have been, but just going forward and not letting what has been entangle me. The second what is finding meaning, that is, making some sense of this tragedy. To do this, parents leaned on their religious and spiritual beliefs by seeing tragedy as a part of the human condition, by their belief that every event has a purpose, and by reaching out in compassion. My gut tells me that finding meaning, as it's defined here, cannot be easy for a bereaved mom to do. Next, we have personal decision. Acceptance and finding a meaning in the tragedy helped parents decide not to allow the tragedy to ruin their lives. These parents decided to leave behind the trauma and its negative consequences in order to move on with their lives, which was a decisive moment in the transformation of the survivors. An important aspect of this personal decision was turning away from hatred. 75% of the participants said that if they let themselves dwell on their hatred toward the perpetrator, they would be overcome by it. They talked of their struggle to get past these feelings. One mother, Victoria, offered this. I didn't know that I was capable of such anger, and I knew that it would do me in if I didn't do something about it. Lastly, reaching out to others in compassion helped parents find balance and sanity. Reaching out to others took up their time and energy, and in that way, helped them not to focus on the negative emotions created by the tragedy. It helped these parents to leave their personal pain behind and be a source of comfort and strength to others. So that answers the question, what did the parents do to thrive? Now let's talk about the how. How did the parents do it? The author summarized that 6 behaviors and practices facilitated transformation. First, parents leaned on their personal qualities. These personal qualities fell into 3 main categories. First, there was a strength of character, which looks like independence, determination, self-confidence, self-reliance, and optimism. Second, there was a goodness, a largeness of heart, which evoked deep compassion in them and which enabled them to reach out to others. Third, there was a group of personal qualities which can be collectively described as their spirituality. And because of its significant contribution to the transformative process, the authors focused on spirituality as an individual behavior. The working definition of spirituality used in this study refers to deep feelings about soul and eternity. Spirituality was different from an institutional allegiance to any particular religion. They understood spirituality more as an attitude of mind and heart that nourished their spirit and emotions and influenced their behavior. Faith in God, belief in a life after death, being thankful, and engaging in prayers and rituals were important components of this spirituality. The third how is continuing the bond with a deceased child. This continuing bond was experienced in many ways. Through the awareness of the victim's continued presence, by focusing attention on love for the victim rather than on the murderer, by filling the void in their lives with happy memories, through an awareness of what the victim would want for the survivor, and through mementos and linking objects such as journals, photo albums, and things that belonged to the victim. One mother, Katharina, said, "I have an ongoing connection with my son. I still talk to him, I ask him questions, I ask for his advice." The awareness of the victim's presence was enhanced through the efforts of the survivors to keep alive the memory of their murdered son or daughter. Foundations, organizations, and groups they founded were part of this effort. The fourth how is leaning on a social support system. Support came from friends, members of the family, the clergy, professional helpers like psychotherapists and psychologists, grief counselors, support groups, and other groups of which they were members, as well as their respective communities. The fifth how is leaning on previous coping experience. Successful coping with previous difficulties and challenges in their lives was a major factor in the survivors' ability to cope with and grow from the trauma of their son or daughter's murder. All the participants had faced challenges in the past and negotiated them successfully, which gave them hope and confidence. Those challenges shaped their attitudes and contributed to build up their resilience. Last but not least, we have self-care as the sixth behavior that facilitated the transformation of bereaved parents. Self-care in this context is defined as engaging in pleasurable activities. All the survivors found something that gave them pleasure and allowed themselves the freedom to engage in it. Reading, listening to music, walking on the beach, taking trips, attending concerts or theater, going to the gym, engaging in hobbies, taking care of pets, and spending time with friends and relatives were some of these activities. Finding time to be alone also helped them process their experience, an important step along the road to healing and transformation. Another component of self-care was allowing themselves to truly feel whatever they needed to feel and giving themselves freedom to vent those feelings. Participants considered venting of feelings beneficial and necessary to leave the trauma behind. Venting of feelings was done through retelling the story of the tragedy again and again. Constructive expression of anger was also an important element of this venting of feelings. As we wind down this episode, I think it's important to note other themes that emerge from the data. which were impact of court trial and forgiveness. These were not part of the transformational experience of most of the participants. I want to read the author's description of a transformed survivor. The general profile of the transformed survivor that emerged from this study is that of a resilient, competent, compassionate, and caring individual characterized by a benevolent, benign, and thankful attitude toward life, shaped by belief systems, strengthened by successful coping with previous tragic experiences, supported by spirituality, friends, family, community, and a strong affective bond with the victim, and nourished through self-care. I find these outcomes compelling. Healing requires so much intentionality and effort, and I commend every parent, especially mothers, trying to chart a healing path. There isn't one way to heal, and I encourage everyone to find something that works. I hope that you heard something helpful during today's episode. I want to highlight some other resources that you might find valuable. Moms Demand Action for Gun Violence is a grassroots movement of Americans fighting for public safety measures that can protect people from gun violence. Visit momsdemandaction.org for more information. The National Organization of Parents of Murdered Children, POMC, has chapters in most states. Chapters are made up of parents and other survivors who meet to talk about their loss and support each other. To find out if there's a chapter in your area, visit pomc.com. The National Organization for Victim Assistance, NOVA, is especially helpful for families working with the criminal justice system. For more information, visit trynova.org. Before we close, I want to have a moment of silence for the mothers and mother figures who have lost one or more children to homicide. May you find peace. May you find compassion. Thanks for listening. If you found this helpful, subscribe to the podcast on your favorite streaming service and share with your friends. Until next time.